Hello there and welcome to Really Cool Excel. Today we're going to look at a variation of the if function called nested if. This is part 3 of if, so if you haven't seen the earlier videos, it might be an idea to go back and take a look at if parts 1 and 2. Just a reminder of what if is used for. It analyzes, usually numeric data, then gives us the result in text or as a numeric value. Here's an example of an if formula from if part 1. If A3 is greater than B3, put success in C3. Otherwise, put failure. So if compares one value, A3, against another value, B3, and returns the result in C3. Either success or failure. So if that is if, what's nested if? The examples in the earlier lessons all used if to test one value against another to produce either a true or false outcome. But what if you need to test one value against a number of options and produce a variety of results depending on the results of the test? That's where you have to use nested if, and by nested I mean placing a number of if statements inside each other, just like a nest of coffee tables. Here's an example to demonstrate how it works. Let's imagine you're recording exam results for these students. Obviously their scores in the exam will produce passes at different grades, or they might have failed. In our example, if a student scores 90 or above, that's an A pass. Between 80 and 89 is a B. 65 to 79 is a C. 40 to 64 is a standard pass. And a score below 40 means student has failed the exam. We'll use nested if to test the student's results against these bandings and produce the correct grade in column C. Now for this lesson I'm not going to use the insert function button to bring up the if wizard as in previous lessons. This time I'll just type the formula straight into the cell. This is a really handy skill when you're building more complex Excel formulas, and you'll see it works particularly well with nested if. First, select the first result cell, C2. We'll replicate the formula down through the other result cells later on. The if formula starts, as usual, equals if, open brackets, B2 is greater than or equal to 90. If it is greater than or equal to 90, return A, placing the A in quotes as it's a text output. Then we need a comma to show that's the first parameter finished. I should say with a numerical comparison like this, you always start with the highest number, because if you start with the lowest number, the formula won't work. With a standard if, we would now specify what the outcome should be if B2 is not greater than or equal to 90. But we've not finished yet. We need to test against the other numbers in our bandings. So after the first parameter, we start off another if, meaning if B2 is not greater than or equal to 90, move on down the bandings. So, if, another open bracket, B2 is greater than or equal to 80, comma, return B, in quotes, and comma again. Then we just carry on. If, open bracket, B2 is greater than or equal to 65, comma, C, and comma. Then if, open bracket, B2 is greater than or equal to 40, comma, return pass, and one last comma. Now we can specify the second parameter in if, what to return if all these conditions have not been met, which in this case is fail, again in quotes. Finally, we have to balance up the number of open brackets with the same number of closed brackets, which in this formula is 4. And click the tick to finish off. Our formula tests Neil's score of 67 against all these ifs. 67 is above 65 but below 80, so his grade is a C. I'll test it by changing the score. 95. Now he's an A pass. Clever boy. Finally, replicate the formula, and here are all the other results. I think Paul's going to have to work a bit harder, don't you? Hopefully you can see that nested if is a very logical formula, but here it is one more time so you can have a good look at it. You might even want to pause the video while you study the structure of the formula. Here's another example that uses nested ifs to compare project expenditure in column B against the budget in column C. Then it will return a comment in column D. If all we had was the figures, analysing them visually would be quite difficult. So we'll use nested ifs in column D to compare the two figures and return a comment from column G. I'm not going to work this one all the way through. I'll just show you the formula and pick out certain elements. I'm sure you'll be able to see how it's all put together. Let's isolate the first if. If B2 is greater than or equal to 1.1 times C2, in other words over 10% over budget, then return the value in G6. The cell reference G6 contains $signs, meaning the cell is absolute. We make the cell absolute because when we replicate the formula down column D, we need to maintain the references to G6 and the other comment cells in column G. If you're not familiar with absolute cell references, check out the Really Cool Excel video on the subject. I could have put the comments themselves in the formula, but that would have made the formula ridiculously long. By keeping the comments separate, we can just include their cell references in the formula. Now you can see all the other ifs are laid out in order. B2 is greater than C2, so over budget but below the 110% level. B2 is greater than 0.9 of C2, so over 90% of spend. B2 is greater than 0.5 of C2, so over 50% of spend. Then after all these ifs, we need the second parameter, what to return if all these conditions have not been met. In this case, G2, below 50% of budget spend. And finally, the 4 closed brackets to balance up the 4 open ones. Now I'll test the formula. Change the spend to 111,000 and there we go. Our nested if is reporting the spend has exceeded budget by at least 10%. I'll undo to change it back again. Last thing, replicate the successful formula down to D12 and there are all our results. So that's nested if. As I said earlier, you would use it when you need to test one value against a number of options and produce a variety of results depending on the results of the test, just like our exam grades and our budget monitoring. Incidentally, you can nest as many as 64 different ifs. Good luck with that one. I'll leave you now to go off and experiment, and if you'd like more practice, download the associated Excel file from the website. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.